Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar focusing on human performance in procedures. Today we have David Jamieson joining us to talk about how integrating human performance into procedure design and management can actually work in practice. David is the Human Factors Lead for Shell and is a chartered member of the CIEHF. Throughout the webinar, if you guys have any questions, please pop them into the chat box and we will either answer them at the end or I'll type out a response as David is speaking. But first, let me just talk you through a little bit about Hpog. So Hpog is a collaborative global independent industry forum focused on developing common and accessible human performance guidance and best practice resources. Together, through the Hpog membership and joint industry associations, we will create a standardized and universal suite of resources, create an online space for people to access those resources for free, share learnings and successes through regular events such as this webinar, and we will fund and sustain the organization through a membership program based on the Global Drops Initiative. The Hpog steering committee is made up of sort of industry operators and service providers such as Baker Hughes, BP, Chevron, IADC, IOGP, IWTCF, Maersk Drilling, Seadrill, Shell, and Total Energies. The Hpog recommended practice is currently focusing on 9 sections as components of a human performance program that can be integrated into your management system. Each focus area includes principles for that focus area, key recommended practices, and detailed guidance by levels of maturity, levels 1, 2, and 3. The levels, so level 1 starts as, I would like to apply something ad hoc with minimal preparation, so more or less kind of awareness level. Level 2 then sort of goes a little bit deeper. I want to make this systematic and sustainable, so I integrate it with existing process and policy. And then level 3, I want to align all relevant processes and departments throughout the business. Each section contains who is this for, what do I need to know, what do I need to do, and relevant resources. The areas that we're focused on at the moment are procedure management, investigation, supply chain and contractor management, workload stress and fatigue, engineering and design, safety critical communication, risk management, proactive learning, and change management. We already had a webinar on investigations, and today we are focusing on procedure management. And this is where I'll hand over to David. David, thank you very much. On you go.
Thanks very much, Brodie. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me okay? Is that an old-fashioned thing to ask?
I can hear you, David.
The lack of trust in technology, is it? Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. So yeah, I'm human factors lead for Shell upstream in the UK. So responsible for everything human factors really. Yeah, one of our sort of key areas is indeed procedures and procedures development. Let me just check I can move these slides. You'll have to forgive me, this is the first time I've used this platform. Right, there we go, that looks good. Forwards and backwards. Yeah, one of our, I mean, I think it's the same for most companies. One of our big areas is procedures and how we manage procedures and how they're used and all the rest of it. And I always think with procedures, on the face of it, it seems like a very simple thing. We're trying to write down how to do something and then do it that way. And when you say it like that, then it seems really simple, and you wonder why it's such a difficult topic. But it is a difficult topic And I think you'll see from, I mean, you probably know that already, but from this presentation, hopefully we'll cover, you know, some of the challenges and some of the things that can help us with the management of procedures. So you can see on this slide here that, I mean, there's the Hpog guidance on this is very good. If you haven't looked at it, I would highly recommend that you do. There's a link later in these slides, or we can make sure that you get a link if you don't have it. But there are some principles that are covered in there regards procedures management. Things that I suppose maybe we've seen before, and it's fairly intuitive. You know, they need to be user friendly, easily accessible, clear, and we need to manage, you know, updates and involve the end user. It's more the practicalities. It's how do we achieve these things, and how do we make procedures really work for us and make it a success. An important point at the bottom of this slide, no procedure, you know, can be an effective prevention, especially against the way we look at this in Shell is where we have major accident risks. You know, we shouldn't be relying on procedures to manage those. We should try and do more. Okay, next. Yeah, so what I'm going to go through, as I say, it's hopefully some practical, you know, some practical advice here. So I've been, or in Shell, we've been looking at safety critical task analysis, which, you know, heavily involves looking at procedures, and we've been doing that now for about 6 years. So I've looked at quite a lot of procedures in that time, and what I'm going to try and bring to this is some of the as I say, challenges and some of the practicalities that I've experienced through doing that work. So you can see that the main kind of topics we'll go through on the slide there. So why do we use procedures? When should we use them? Level of detail, something that I think we always find a bit tricky. Using procedures in the real world, so some of the kind of limitations and challenges, and then the last piece is about integration within the management system. So how do we actually do that? What does that look like? Okay, so we'll dive in. Yeah, okay. So the first thing here is, you know, fundamentally asking ourselves why do we use procedures, which is closely tied to when would we use one. So we use procedures as a support. They should support people. Different people have different needs, but if somebody was less experienced or needed some training, then that's one reason why we might use a procedure. We want to standardize, so do things in the most effective way. That's another reason. And then there's the safety angle. So by using procedures, we can help to identify errors and hopefully minimize errors in what we do. So there are some good reasons for using them. I think that can sometimes be a bit lost, or maybe we just don't communicate that very well. And it feels like people have to follow procedures because we just tell them to. Anyway, the understanding of why I think helps us with when we should use a procedure. So what we use is the flow chart you see on the right hand side there. This is actually from Health and Safety Executive in the UK guidance, and I think that those are useful pointers as to when we might need a procedure. So it's about the criticality or maybe the complexity of the task, how often do we do it, and how experienced is the user. So from that, you could say, if there's no safety risks identified in the task, it's simple, it's familiar, we do it often, and it's always done by very experienced operators, then is there a real need for a procedure? Maybe a job aid or a checklist would do. If we answered yes to any of those, then yeah, we should have a procedure. One question that might come up is, what's the difference between a procedure and a job aid or a checklist? I didn't quite find a definition when I looked, but my way of separating those things is that a procedure is where you would break something down into steps, and each step makes sense by itself. So it's almost like a sentence, so we can read a step and we understand what to do from that, and that makes up a procedure. Whereas in a job aid or a checklist or a diagram, that's more about prompting people. So we might just use words to prompt people to think in the right way, but it doesn't give a description of exactly what to do. So that would be the difference. So why is it important to consider when to use a procedure? So yeah, one of the things here is that if we have procedures for everything, and I'll be honest, we in Shell, we have a tendency to have a procedure for just about everything, that can actually be quite counterproductive. It can be it's a lot of effort, a lot of work to maintain that, and sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees, as it were. Everything becomes, all tasks almost become the same, and we lose sight of the more critical tasks. And I think there's also another thing that I've heard. I mean, I've heard this from our operators, is that there can be a lack of, if we proceduralize absolutely every small thing, it can feel like there's a lack of recognition for competence and experience and knowledge and ability. It's as if they can't be trusted to do anything, so we have to write everything down, and that's not not always a good thing. So it's a really important starting point to consider. Do we actually need the procedure in the first place? Now, this is where I need my my example. So let me click here, share. Is that coming through? Do I need to click on that? Here we are. So I think is telling me that the audience is downloading the attachment. I think that's what it's telling me. It's about halfway there. Okay, I'm seeing the thumbs up. So we have it. Yeah, we have it. Okay, good. I'm still getting used to this. So what we have here, this is actually based on a procedure from one of our gas plants, and I've taken away all the Shell isms, so it's just a it'll read as a generic procedure, but it's actually based on a real procedure. we have. So you can see here that there's how many pages? 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. 4 pages. So the procedure is for topping up a vessel. So it's refrigerant, and it's for topping up that vessel. Now there's only really seven steps, which, yeah, if you're on page 2, the steps start topping up refrigerant level in V100, and then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps, and then end of procedure. Now, in actual fact, what's happening here is it's basically the control room operator opening a valve and then closing a valve again. There's really not much more to it than that. We've managed to spin it out into 7 steps, but it's kind of opening a valve and closing a valve. We've analysed this, and there's no safety critical aspects to this. It's not complicated. It's always done by the CRO, so it's a very experienced person, and yet we have a procedure for it. We have 4 pages worth, and we have all the admin that goes with that. So we have a live review section, a completion section, a final sign-off. So that there's it's not just that we've written these steps down, but it's all the admin that goes with it. The procedure then has to be maintained, and all the rest of it. We've made reference to other documents, but pretty standard stuff. So looking at this and going back to the flow chart, if we worked our way through that flow chart for that task, we'd probably decide that we didn't need a procedure, but we do, and you sort of ask yourself, well, do we really need one? And we probably, well, I know that we have lots of tasks where we have of that nature, where we have procedures, and it's probably just not effective, not necessary. But it's difficult to backtrack, I would say. Once you have one, it can be difficult to then say, well, let's take it away and not have it. So if you get the chance to look at these things up front, if it's I don't know, if it's on a project and you're looking at what procedures are needed, it's very worthwhile working your way through this to decide, do you really need a procedure? Okay, topping up a vessel, so we've been through that. Okay, so this next one is about level of detail, this next piece. So something that, again, through experience, something that we don't always get right. So what I'd say about level of detail is again, you can use the flow chart to help you with that. So how much detail do you need? Well, there's no simple answer. It depends, and it depends on things like, is the task safety critical? How complex is the task? How often do we do it? And how experienced are the people who do it? So again, if it's simple, familiar, not overly complicated, and done by experienced people, we probably don't need too much detail. But at the other end of the spectrum, if we know there are safety critical steps, there's a lot of steps. We rarely do it. Even for experienced people, if it's something that's done very rarely, you might need quite a bit of detail in the procedure. So you can use this flowchart to decide on your level of detail. And absolutely, I think we all know this, but it doesn't always happen. It's absolutely involve the users, the end users, the operators or the maintainers, the technicians. These people, they know the job, the tasks better than anybody else. If we don't get the right input from them, we can't have the best procedure. So we need to take a bit of steer there as to how much detail they feel they need, rather than forcing detail on them. How much do they think that they need? And there is a risk here. If we've got too much detail, and I've seen, I'm going to show you an example of this in a second. That in itself can cause problems. Again, it's you can't see the wood for the trees. You can't see the critical steps because there's just so much detail. It's very difficult for people to work through. So yeah, just not an effective procedure. So the example I have, yeah, here we are. So this is just a small extract from, and this was a procedure that we had. It's since been modified, so we don't have this issue anymore. But it did exist at one time. This is just a small part of a very, very long procedure. So it was for pigging, and one of our platforms, condensate pigging, 365 steps. So that's a long procedure. I mean, most of our pigging procedures are probably around maybe 100 steps, but this was long, 365 steps. And what you see here is it's basically, we've managed to find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 kind of steps or steps and sub-steps for opening and closing a valve. So all you really need to look at here is open V46 and close V46 again. That's really all we're saying. But it's part of an interlock key system, and we need to key it open, put a key in, take a key out, retain a key. I mean, there's no need to write that every time. And that type of sequence appeared 41 times in the procedure. So no wonder it was so long. And it's just, I mean, it was painful going through it. I have to tell you. Just so much unnecessary detail that the operators just didn't need for just opening and closing a valve. So really not good. But as I say, I'm glad to say we've remedied that one, and we don't have that issue anymore. But it just shows you what, it was best intentions when it was written, but just shows you how it can go wrong. Okay. Right, using procedures in the real world. Yeah, so this is taken from the Hpog guidance, pretty much, which I mentioned earlier. But I really like this because I think that a lot of the issues that we have with procedures kind of stem from these three assumptions that a lot of people make. And if we could get sort of a better understanding or a better appreciation of these difficulties, then I think we'd probably make a better job of procedures. So here they are. So first of all, we tend to assume that work is always step by step. It's just as easy as I said at the beginning. I think to a lot of people it seems easy just to write down how we'll do something, and we'll just say we're going to do it in 10 steps, and it's always going to be 1 to 10. What could be difficult about that? But the reality is that when you're out there doing a job, it's very rare that you can go through everything in a nice, neat sequence every single time. Just go 1 to 50 every single time. It just doesn't happen in the real world. There are interdependencies between steps. There are things that happen at the same time. So as an example, in a lot of our procedures, we have the CRO, the control room operator, doing something, and an outside tech doing something, and these things can be happening at the same time. So and that can happen often during a task. So it's not always easy to say, one step after the next step. So there has to be a bit of flexibility in there, and often procedures are not good at doing that. The next one is, again, so we always tend to assume that the work is predictable. We've planned it, we've got a good procedure, it'll go to plan. I think we all know that that just is often not the case. You know, work is full of variation. Things will vary day to day, from 1 hour to the next hour, from doing the task one day to the next time you do it. It might be a little bit different. The conditions have changed a little bit. The equipment might have changed. The weather, who's doing it. There's so many little variables that can change things. And sometimes the workers have to adapt, and they're good at doing that, usually. And then the third thing, we tend to assume that the worker has full control over the situation and what they're doing. And I'm sure you talk to any operator and they'll tell you that, well, that's just not always the case. That they're constrained. They've got limited. They're limited in lots of ways. Limited in terms of time, resource, limited possibly in terms of knowledge. It might be actual kind of that kind of limitation. So all these sort of things have to be taken into account. And I think the key sort of point here is that that there's variability in work, and people have to adapt, and everything would fall over if that wasn't the case. We can't just write perfect procedures. So procedures need to be there needs to be enough flexibility in procedures to allow for that variability and the adaptations that are sometimes needed. And if there isn't, then that procedure is going to be difficult to follow. So I really think that these three assumptions here, when you're writing a procedure, these are things that you really need to keep in mind as you're doing that. Now I think I have. Yeah, so I have another example here. So this was pigging as well, a different pigging task, and I was offshore, so I was on one of our platforms, and we were having a look at this procedure, and I went out with the operators for part of the task. But basically, we had the procedure, so we were trying to, they were using the procedure, and I was trying to follow. And they were, talking me through it, how they go through the steps. So basically, what we found was that there were places in the task where what was being done or what had to be done, it didn't quite match how it was written. But there was quite a few of these, and you can see the examples there. It was valves missing from the procedure, or the valve wasn't working at all, or the valve didn't operate quite as it was assumed it did in the procedure. So there was quite a few of these little things. None of them prevented the task from being done. It could be done safely, but just not quite as written in the procedure, if you like. And the issue that we found is that if we're overly prescriptive with the procedure, it's written that way, you absolutely have to do that step that way. If you can't do it that way, don't do it. Stop the work and let's discuss it. I mean, if we're so prescriptive, we're hearing from our operators that they become almost nervous about trying to do a task. It becomes very difficult for them to do the task, and they might just feel, well, I'm going to stop, when actually we wouldn't really want them to stop, because it's these are just small things that can be worked through, but they're nervous about not following the exact wording in the procedure. So it all becomes a bit counterproductive, really, and that that to me was a good example of, there does need to be that bit of flexibility in there to reflect real work and real life. So one of the things you can do here, and I don't have a slide on it, but so we have the walk-through, talk-through approach, and you might do some sort of variation of this. But in the Hpog guidance, and you can see the link there, that there's a section that takes you through this walk-through, talk-through approach. But this is something that we do that can make a real difference to the quality of your procedures. So by actually going through a task with the operator, and sort of exploring the realities of it and how that's reflected in the procedure, and looking out for steps where if something went wrong, that could be a critical step, and thinking about what we call performance influencing factors. So the factors to do with the person, the job, the tools that they have to use, the procedures that they have to follow, the process, the permit to work process, maybe the communications. How do these things affect how the task is done, and how do we factor that into the procedures as well? So by using this approach, we can get better procedures, and ultimately, work becomes easier and safer for the operators as well. So well worth having a look at that when you get the chance. All right. Okay, so this is the last piece. So this is about integration of procedures within your management system. So what I've done here is this is actually the contents page from so we have a procedures management standard, or a procedure for managing procedures kind of idea, that sits in our management system, our safety management system, and that's the contents page from it. So this is something we've developed over the last few years. So you can see that there's a lot more to managing procedures than you might first think. It might just, again, it seems like a simple thing. Well, let's write down what we do and keep that, save that somewhere, and just make sure that we use it and review it now and again. So there's a lot more to it. So we have in ours we have the piece about why and when. We have guidance for writing a new procedure, and there's plenty of that out there. You'll find it in the Hpog guidance, best practice guidance for writing a new procedure. So we have some of that in there. We do have, if you like, instructions for using procedures. So we say for certain types of procedures, they must be used. A hard copy must be used every time and signed off, and that's for the safety critical procedures. We've got stuff in there on changing and updating procedures, and for reviewing and the assurance of procedures, and the communication of changes as well. So there's quite a bit there, and the bits in red, are where, because it's one of the things that, one of the sort of potential complications here is that where you've got interfaces or links with other parts of your management system. So changing and updating a procedure, so that links into our management of change procedure. Safety critical procedures, well, we have a separate standard for doing safety critical task analysis, so that has to link into procedures. Communicating changes, we actually have a little piece on how, I mean, again, it seems like sometimes it feels like you're making a bit of a meal of it, but definitely one of the issues we found is that procedures get updated and nobody knows about it, which undermines the whole thing. So when you do update a procedure, how do you make sure that everybody knows about it? So we've got a little piece on that, and then the assurance piece ties in with our assurance, our audit processes, so that part of our management system. So yeah, again, on the face of it, might not seem a lot to it, but it does need a bit of thought as to how managing procedures needs to link in to everything else. And the final point here is that it's tying it back to human performance or human factors. It's this is taking a systems approach, really. If you look at procedures as procedures within the wider system, and involving the end user, change management, safety critical task analysis. It's kind of injecting human performance into all these different aspects that all need to come together to give us an effective set of procedures. Okay, I think that is the last slide. Let me have a look. It is. Here's the last slide. Yeah. Okay, so I hope you found that useful, and I think we've got plenty of time for questions and discussion. Is Brodie coming back in? Yeah.
Hi, David. Thank you for that. So I've highlighted some questions, and I'll just head back to the start. So
yeah,
the first one was for Chris. And it should be up now, but he asked, does Shell still put traffic lights on procedures and documents?
Traffic lights. We don't. I'm trying to think. We don't have a traffic light system as such. No. What we have is that some procedures are identified as safety critical, so they set apart from other procedures. But there isn't a kind of red, amber, green type system.
Okay. The next one was from Albert. Is a procedure not a kind of work as imagined?
Yeah. So that's a good point. So this is one of the key challenges for not just procedures, but just for human performance, human factors in general. This difference between work as imagined and work in reality, and this is definitely an issue with procedures. I come across it all the time, and this is really where we need to find ways to get the end user involved and engaged as much as possible, because like I said before, they're the ones who understand the work better than anybody, and if we can't get that input into the procedure, then it's always going to be lacking something. So if, as can quite often be the case, we've got somebody in the office writing the procedure, and then it's getting sent offshore to be followed, there can only be difficulties with that. And I've certainly seen, if you're an engineer, like a process engineer, let's say, so I've seen this where the process engineer will write the procedure. Now that's fine, maybe, but a process engineer will write the procedure differently to how an operator would write the procedure. but it's the operator that has to use it. So there's an issue there straight away. And can even be an issue where, you know, we've got kind of ops engineers who sit in the office and they might write the procedures. Now that's better. That's getting closer to the person who's actually, because that person's probably done the job recently, but still, you know, if they've been sat in the office for 3 years or more, I don't know, and they're writing procedures, there's still a gap there between the way they're writing it and what's actually happening offshore. So it absolutely just needs to be input from the people doing the job.
Yeah, I think there's a section in the Hpog guidance on stakeholder engagement. It's alongside the level of detail as well. It kind of goes through some of that as well.
I mean, one of the things we've tried to do, and you maybe saw it on the example I had there. This is only for at the back of the safety critical procedures. We've put a live review section. So the idea is that, you know, you do the task, and then at the end of it, you write down, you know, what worked, what didn't work, what needs changed. We've had, to be honest, like probably limited success with that. We've had feedback along the lines of, well, I write things in there, but nothing gets done. Nothing gets done with it. So what's the point? Or if I want to get something changed, I wouldn't write it there. I would just go and speak to the supervisor, and that's fine. But it's try to think about ways that you can engage and listen to the front line on these things. And I think that's just a constant. I'd love to hear if anybody's got feels they've got, you know, ways of doing that really works for them.
Cool. Next one's from Jamie. So aren't there some safety critical tasks where you wouldn't use a step-by-step procedure? The example he used is driving.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, you certainly wouldn't, would you? Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. So one of the things we found is that so we do say, yeah, you need to use the safety critical procedure every time. But one of the issues we found, so for example, if we've got and again I'm thinking about at our gas plants, one of our gas plants, a furnace trip. So a furnace trip is a safety critical procedure. But if the furnace trips, the CRO is a busy man. There's lots of things he's got to do and to, you know, have his eyes on, and he's not going to be reading through a procedure line by line when he's doing that. That's just the reality of it. So I think, I mean, driving is an example, but sort of closer to what we do on the plants. Even there, it's possibly a bit fanciful to think that the operator will be reading through a safety critical procedure line by line, especially if it's a trip, you know, sort of process upset scenario. So in that scenario, what we've said is, well, okay, we understand that, and we probably don't want you with your head in a procedure at that time. So then it's more about a flow chart or a quick aid memoir type thing that's just there that you could glance at. So for furnace trip, it's just something you can glance at, and it just gives them. It's more like what you'd have in an emergency response type manual. You know, we've got flow charts as part of emergency response where you don't read through procedures for emergency response, or at least that's not how we do it anyway. It's more about a quick quick have I thought of everything? Have I considered everything? Quick prompts rather than line by line type thing. So so I think it's a really good point. It's not as simple as saying every safety critical task. I mean, well, you might have a procedure for every safety critical task, but it's not as simple as saying that will be kind of read through every time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah.
Okay, next one's from Gunnar. So a challenge we have identified implementing HOP is that we need to have some rules, e.g. life-saving rules, wear a helmet, in combination with HOP principles. Do you have some advice on how we can integrate or combine BBS and HOP in our procedures?
Yeah, some rules, yeah. Yeah, that's a good question as well. So we have, I mean, we have the same issue really. In terms of how, so we have we do have life-saving rules, but we now have a set of what we call process safety fundamentals, which are kind of similar to life-saving rules, but they're, as the name suggests, they're about process safety, major accident type scenarios rather than personal safety. And what we've done is we've put them at the front of certain procedures, and we've kind of flagged them at relevant points in the procedure, so to try and integrate them within what people actually do. I don't think we've done that so much with life-saving rules, but that's kind of one way that we've tried to combine the two. I mean, it is because you do need it. Yeah, it's I get the issue here. I'm sat here saying there needs to be flexibility and adaptability. People need to be able to adapt, within what it says in the procedure, but we need to have some rules at the same time. So there is a balance to be struck there. I would say, and this just adds a bit more complexity, I'm afraid, but we find that with our life-saving rules and the process safety fundamentals are the same, that even those are not black and white, or they're rarely black and white. They're more when you actually look behind what the life-saving rule is saying, then there's like a bit of guidance that goes with that. It's how we want people to do things, and it does start to get into behavioral safety. We want you to do these things when you do this working at height task, for example. So you almost need to, and I know the rules, but you almost need to look at those things in a similar kind of way. I mean, are they written in a way that that are kind of setting people up for success? We do find that you can read those, and sometimes you can wonder how it's not black and white. It can be a very grey area as to whether somebody is within that life-saving rule or not. But that's probably a different conversation.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Elliot asked, if you determine whether step-by-step procedure is needed, is there additional consideration for when placekeeping is necessary for every step? So in the HPOG guidance, there is a section on it, but it doesn't kind of state when you should use it or when it's kind of needed or not?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's another good question. So if I talk from our experience here, so when we first came out with our safety critical procedures, probably 5-6 years ago, every step needed a check. Every single step needed a tick. Now, some of these could be quite, pages and pages, 100 steps. The feedback we got from the operators is that it just didn't work. It didn't reflect reality, and it became just a tick box exercise afterwards. Or they would do a chunk of it, tick, 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 then another chunk of it, tick, tick, tick. And we were losing sight of the critical steps. So what we moved to instead was, we've identified critical steps, and actually we now have safety critical steps and production critical steps. And it's only those that need the sign or the stop or the check or whatever. It's only those. And our people have found that much better, and it reflects reality a lot better. They can't. It's like I was saying about the idea that we can go through everything step by step. I mean, they're finding that that's just not how it works in reality. So the procedure doesn't really support what they do.
Okay, yeah, no, that.
So that's our experience with it anyway.
Cool, thank you. Teresa asked, so let me ask you a general question. How often are procedures used as an excuse in the company when some incident or accident arises? It's clear that some procedures sort of nobody ever reads or resorts to. So how does that then translate into sort of the company turning around and arguing that it happened because the operator didn't follow the procedure?
Yeah. So this is quite a common thing. Certainly in my experience, it seemed, I mean, up until fairly recently, it seemed that every investigation we did, we just ended up saying it was because somebody didn't follow the procedure, and then the action was to possibly a compliance issue, make sure that they did the next time, and rewrite the procedure or add a bit to the procedure, just make it even longer with more detail. And often when you really analyze it, then the procedure wasn't a cause at all. It wasn't properly causal, and just by focusing on the procedure wasn't really going to prevent a similar thing from happening again. So it is. There's a big kind of education piece in here, I think, for human performance, and this gets into the HF/HP and investigations piece that in all the investigations I've been involved in, not following the procedure is very, if ever been a true cause in the incident. There's always other things going on. There's other factors, or it's something about the procedure itself. We find ambiguities in the procedures, and procedures that just don't reflect the operational reality and all the rest of it. So yeah, my advice would be very careful about quickly reaching the conclusion that it's because of the procedure and somebody didn't follow the procedure. There'll be other things that have had more influence than whether somebody followed the procedures or not.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Elliot asked another question. Do you have a specific procedure template, an optimal flow of information? So like for a sequence of topics in the table of contents, and also asked about the optimal length of a procedure and whether the task should be divided into separate individual procedures.
Yeah, so we do have guidance on this. So we do have templates. We have procedure templates that we use, and we have guidance on well, they were based on sort of best practice, and we also have guidance for anybody writing a new procedure. So yeah, things like how long should it be? I mean, that really comes back to the level of detail slide that I went through. It's hard to say. Um, it just needs to have enough detail, and that's going to depend on various things. That definitely dividing things up into chunks is definitely good practice, and that might be that for something like pigging. Going back to pigging as an example, so sometimes we have pigging broken up into 2 or 3 different procedures, rather than one long one. And then certainly within a procedure, you want to have it broken into chunks, so it's just easier. People just process things easier that way, rather than I've got 100 steps to go through. It's actually not. It's five sections, 5 smaller sections, rather than thinking about it as 100 steps. But it's all in it's in the Hpog guidance. There's lots of good best practice guidance in there about that would help you if you wanted to come up with a procedure template.
Thank you. Tahir asked quite a direct question. So does Shell use digital solutions with augmented reality to aid operator and control the flow of tasks as per procedure?
Yeah, so I believe that, so we don't in the UK. We don't in the UK, but I believe there are parts of Shell, so downstream manufacturing in the US. I've heard have started getting into electronic procedures, so it makes it easier to control them, update them. You can look at them, on some sort of an iPad or whatever when you're out in the field. So not something I've really looked at myself. All sounds good. Sounds great, but I mean, there might be issues with using that sort of technology as well that need to be thought about. But it from what I know about it, it does feel like there's a big opportunity there. It does seem like that would be a good way to go, but I mean, resources permitting, I don't know the costs associated with these things, but
Okay. Leslie asks, how do we balance the human factor risk of procedure overload with the demands from regulators, clients, and auditors for procedures for everything?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult one. So certainly from the regulator point of view, I mean, I've been involved in a number of inspections where, and there was one case where, well, it's probably happened more than once, where the regulator comes in and sort of is quite critical of one or more procedures, and then we set about trying to sort of rewrite the procedures just to keep them happy. And we've found that that's just the wrong thing to do, really, because they'll never be happy. in a sense, they always just turn it around and say, we're the experts. We should know, how to write procedures and be able to stand by what's in there. And that's the way I try to look at it. We shouldn't be writing procedures to try and make the regulator happy. We should, if we've got the right input to the procedures. So one thing they will say is, have you involved the operator? Have you involved the user? I mean, and if we can show that we have, and I know that they need input from other disciplines as well, but I think if we can stand behind our process for procedures, we should be able to stand behind our procedures with some confidence and not be kind of dictated to by the regulator, because they're not an expert on writing procedures. It's not what they do. I guess it would go with, I don't know. Yeah, I can kind of imagine your experience with Shell regards what we demand in terms of procedures, and I imagine that's not always easy. When I see we're not necessarily doing a good job with our own procedures, being honest. But I'd say something similar. If you can show that there's a kind of process behind it, and you've had the right input from the right people, it's about trying to stand behind that with a bit of confidence, but not easy.
Okay, thank you. And another one from Leslie. Again, we have a bit of guidance on this in the procedure document. But what's your view on the use and the limitations of photos in procedures?
I'd say we probably don't do it enough. Yeah, I mean, if it's the right photograph, I mean, and not something that could kind of go out of date, because whatever the photograph is of will change. But if you can be confident with the photograph, then it can only be a good thing. I mean, it is the old saying that a good photograph can speak 1,000 words, or whatever it is. We just, if you open up one of our procedures, it's lines and lines and lines of text, and I think definitely diagrams and photographs and flowcharts can make these things a lot more usable. So I'd certainly, I'm all for it.
Cool, thank you. I think there's a little bit that kind of touches on kind of making sure that if it's color photos, it's printed in color, and kind of having, if it's black and white photos, then it's just kind of making sure that if it's a printed procedure, that the photos will be able to stand up on their own as well. Like the document kind of touches on that as well. Last one from Tahir again. So in the newly applied life-saving rules in Shell, especially in bypass safety controls, is that linked with violation of procedures?
Is it linked with violation of procedures? I'm not 100% on the question. Is that meaning if would we look at that life-saving rule and say that somebody is there's been a violation in relation to the life-saving rule? Or
I think the question is violation of procedures linked to bypass safety controls? I think that's what he's asking. Oh, sure. If you can, Tahir, if you can sort of clarify it, then that'd be good. We've got one more. Oh, yes, yeah. So that's is violations of procedures linked to the bypass rule?
If you I'm still not 100%. If you bypass a safety control, that would be linked to a violation of procedures. I mean, it might be. I mean, I think when when we look at a potential life-saving rule breach, which is what we should do, it should be a potential usually to start off with. One of the things you might look at is the procedure that was involved, and how that was followed or otherwise. So there might be a linkage there. I mean, violations is probably a whole other topic. Yeah, I mean, violations can be not an easy topic. I mean, it's probably could be part of the incident investigation conversation, but we've just recently done a piece of work looking at we don't even, well, the human factors people in Shell anyway, we don't even like to call them violations. We talk about deviations. You've deviated to a procedure rather than you've violated one. But we've tried to look at how does a potential deviation stroke violation, how would you look at that as part of an investigation? How do you take that into account? Because we don't want to shy away from it, but we can be too quick to go down that route. So how do we make sure we can factor it in a balanced kind of way? So yeah, like I say, probably a whole other topic by itself.
Cool, thank you. And last question, I think from Elliot again. There's a decent amount of information on this in the guidance from Hpog, but what is the most effective way you have found to designate or identify critical steps in procedures? So if that's like colors, different boxes, outlines, or symbols.
Yeah. So we definitely. I mean, I'm sure we don't have the best way of doing this, but we've used all three. Basically, we've used it's red, it's in a box, and it has a little warning symbol, and it says safety critical step, and it needs to be signed off. So I'm sure there's different ways of doing that. But yeah, you said it, Brody. I think there's probably good guidance on that in the Hpog document.
Cool. Thank you very much. I think that's it for all the questions. So those of you who are left, thank you very much for joining us. I found it fascinating, and thanks David for your time and effort in helping us put this together.
No, good. Thank you. It was it's been a pleasure, and thanks to everybody for dialing in. Thanks for the questions. Good questions. A lot of good questions.
Yeah, I agree. And to those that are left as well, the recording will be made available. So make sure you follow the Hpog LinkedIn if you don't already. We'll make it available there, along with the slides and the resources as well. So yeah, thank you very much, and thanks again, David. And we'll speak to you soon.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.